please help me in welcoming Clio's Nisha.
Very good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great time at ClioCon so far. All right. Oh, I love a good cheer. Okay. So my name is Nisha Kritivasan. I'm a product marketing manager here at Clio. I've been with Clio. This next May will be about 4 years. So thanks so much for making it for the session today. I am super excited to be introducing us to our speaker for the session today, Amelie Vavrovsky. And so she honestly really doesn't need any introduction to ClioCon. Probably this is her second or third time here giving us a talk. So she's the founder and CEO of Formally. Formally is basically the very first AI native legal platform. It's mainly built to radically improve the client experience. It's backed up by top law firms and trusted AmLaw, 100 leaders. And formally, when you think about what they do, is they combine ethical AI, a word that we're all very familiar with right now. So it's not just about AI, it's about secure design, it's about automation with the whole goal to make legal work faster, clearer, and a lot more collaborative. So Amelie is a Stanford-trained expert in AI. And she's also not just an expert in AI, but also in digital rights. She is a Codex, an HAI fellow, and has also been recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30 and the American Bar Association. And she's been mainly recognized for her work at the intersection of technology, law, and access to justice. So please give me a warm welcome in introducing Amelie to all of you.
Hey. Thank you so much, Nisha. It's so exciting to be here. There's so many of you, so I love that AI is striking a chord. Thank you so much for having me. So today, I think the headline is really, AI is here. I know everyone's talking about it, and I'm hoping to have a really practical conversation about what that means for you. And headlines, spoiler alert, everything I'm seeing, your job is safe. That being said, we're definitely seeing increased adoption, right? We went from 19% last year to about 79% of firms using AI. So you can see there's definitely an increased interest, but also increased adoption rate. So excited to have you all here. And our journey today is really going to cover some practical aspects of AI. As Nisha mentioned, I spent a lot of my time at Stanford thinking about the ethics of AI, but also thinking about security and safety, right? So I'm building in Silicon Valley, I'm building a tech company. I use AI every single day for a lot of things I do, but I also spend a lot of time thinking about security and safety. So we'll start there, right? We'll be thinking about clearing up some misconceptions, helping you think through how to evaluate AI tools for safety and security, understanding the privacy implications. Part 2 will really cover some real-world examples of how to incorporate AI, and if you are support staff, how to also think about things like how to talk to your managing attorney about it, right? How can we actually start integrating AI at the firm? What are some concrete steps, some workflows that you can take away? And then we'll talk about your kind of 30-day plan, right? If you haven't started integrating AI heavily into your practice yet, I'll give you some concrete suggestions of how you can get started. And then part 4, which is what I'm most excited about, is really getting deep on your questions, anything that you've been meaning to ask. I'm really an open book, so I'm really hoping that you do submit questions and that we get to address them together.
So Amelie, we're not just having audiences seated right here. We actually have a very big group that's joined us virtually as well. So
amazing.
Those of you who are watching this virtually, would like to welcome you guys as well. And we will be taking in questions, as she mentioned, at the end of the session. Quick note, I'm sure at the end of it, everybody's going to have a lot of questions. So we are going to have someone at the end of this that will come to you with a mic, and then you can go ahead, ask your question, just so that we make sure everybody feels heard. All right, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Nisha. I love that, and hello, everyone virtually. So I wanted to set out a really clear goal for the session, right? Because I think I've been to a lot of conferences, a lot of sessions, and I want to make sure that you have a clear goal, right? So today, our goal is going to be that by the end of the session, you'll have at least one AI workflow that you can use starting tomorrow morning, and you'll know exactly how to talk to your team or your managing attorney about it. So if we can hit that goal, then I think we'll hopefully have a really productive session. So like I said, I think jobs are safe, right? But I do think it's worth mentioning that your role is going to evolve, right? And that's true whether you're support staff or whether you're a partner practicing law. I think there's no question in my mind that your role is going to evolve. But what I think is exciting is that we also get to choose how it's evolving, right? So let's dig into that a little bit more, right? How can we actually rethink legal work in the age of AI?
I love that.
So first, we'll start with some things that AI can handle, and we can dig deeper, right? If you have any questions, we'll dig deeper. But here's some, basic things that have gotten good. So typing up handwritten notes, OCR technology combined with large language models suddenly got better, right? So this technology that we've had for 20 years very recently got a lot better. So taking pictures of notes and feeding them into large language models suddenly works pretty well, right? Like we leverage that a lot at Formally. We do a lot of data extraction from messy legal documents, and that works really, really well now. First drafts of routine letters. Actually, interestingly, I don't think you need to use the LLM to generate all of it. You can sometimes just use the LLM to generate a template and then insert data into it, so we can talk about that. Organizing client documents. Again, we built a product called Magic Docs that can take in any client documentation, right? Client can come as they are. No need to label things anymore. It can categorize and extract data based on what document type it is. It can help you find things descriptively, right? With semantic search, you can say, hey, I had a client that had this case, could you help me understand who that was? So you can actually ask questions more naturally instead of having to use search terms. And it can even do things like with agentic workflows, creating calendar entries from emails. And of course, this is just a small list, but these are some of the ways that, AI can actually already be incorporated into your practice.
Quick question, Emily. I'm just curious, how many of you all use AI on a very regular basis today? Just a quick show of hands.
That's awesome. That's
Wow.
great.
Okay, great.
And the other question, though, is like, what can only you do? And I encourage you to think about that deeply, right? Like, these are just some suggestions that I've heard from our customers, our clients, the people I work with. But talk to worried clients, assuaging fears, really being of counsel, talking to people when they need you most. I think that's a superpower, and it's also something that's going to be more and more in demand, right? What people really crave, in my experience, is great legal care. And that means, yes, processing documents and making sure that the case makes it through, but it also means that connection, that human element, right? That ability to follow up and feel known and seen. Also knowing judgment, I always say that AI doesn't have good judgment. It's basically a probability machine, right? Large language models are based on probabilities, and they're amazing, and they're so useful, right? Like, I truly believe that, but it's not necessarily able to reason or make judgment calls the way you can make judgment calls. So trust your gut and know that that's a superpower. And the next thing is building relationships, of course, right? Like making time for that extra chat, building the connection, and then also things like understanding context and nuance. I'll caveat that, large language models in some cases can actually understand nuance and context, but not in the same way that you can, right? LLMs can basically only understand the context and nuance that is included in its training data or included in the retrieval augmented generation data set, but you have so much more context, right? So trust that as well and know that that's another superpower you have. So I think the short of it is, and this is a quote I stole from the ABA journal, right? Like, I don't think there's a need to worry about AI taking your job, but I do think there are paralegals who know how to use AI that could potentially take your job if there is, hesitancy to adopt. I think this should be a wake-up call. This technology is very much here, and I don't think it's a fad, and we can dig into that more as well if you're curious, but this is here to stay, and I think this feels like a transformation the same way cloud computing has been a transformation.
Question though, compared to, let's say, a year ago to now, do you still feel the level of sentiment of AI is potentially going to be taking our jobs at some point? Do you feel that has kind of lessened as people are starting to understand and use AI? Do you feel that is the case, like that sentiment is dying down a little bit?
I'm in two minds about that, because I see, living in Silicon Valley and the way my work has changed, it's changed dramatically. And I think that the better large language models get, the more essential it is to be up to date with what's happening. So I think people underestimate that sometimes, right? I think it's easy to say, hey, the large language model gave a stupid response to this question I asked it, therefore I can kind of dismiss it categorically. I think that's misleading, right? I think that when prompted correctly, large language models are extremely powerful. So I would not categorically dismiss a model because it gave you the wrong answer to a math question, right? Again, we can talk about how these models think and how they operate if you're curious about that. But my message to you is craft your own AI journey and destiny, right? Like be in a driver's seat. Don't be a passenger. Don't let it happen to you. Be part of shaping what that narrative is, right? And think about the things you enjoy that are worthwhile. So as somebody who loves automation, I use a notebook and I write down my thoughts, and I like to brainstorm before brainstorming with an LLM by myself with my team, old-fashioned, traditioned way. And that's because I love doing that. So don't let it take the things that you love doing, but shape your work around the things you love doing and be intentional about that. So that's, I guess, my narrative. There's a long, wound answer to your question. I do think it will change the work, but I think if you're not active in shaping what your AI journey is, it'll happen to you instead of you being in the driver's seat about it.
Thank you.
So concretely, I love statistics, but we don't have to get caught up on these too much. But right now, what your peers are using AI for is mostly for summarizing long documents, finding information quickly, and then also drafting routine correspondence, right? I love the center one, finding information quickly. We're seeing a ton of users use like ChatGPT, for instance, to get answers to questions online. I don't know that that's the best use to get answers quickly, right? Again, because it's a probabilistic answer, so if you want to do deep research, it might not actually give you the best answer, but it's really good at helping you recall, what was that thing I was working on? What was that document I meant to think? Can you help me find the case where somebody is looking about something specific, right? So instead of asking it to draft your legal research for you, ask it, hey, I remember there was that case where that lawyer used ChatGPT and it was related to an airline, and it's going to be oh, you mean the Avianca case, right? But that's so interesting because Google search can't do that, right? They can't really work as well because it's keyword based. So the fact that you have a large language model being able to infer a lot of the context means that your search results are going to be a lot more powerful.
Quick show of hands, how many of you actually use ChatGPT on a regular basis at work? Wow. Okay.
Wow, that's awesome. So also, I just want to say your concerns are valid. I think we should cover them, and I think we should go over why concerns around AI are valid, right? When there's hesitancy, and when there's when you sense a bit of resistance to starting to use the models, also start trusting that to a certain extent. So let's unpack some of the risks together. So like I said, my basic training was in security and cybersecurity and ethical AI, right? So I spent a lot of time thinking about both the security risks and the privacy risks. And there are two types of risks when you're looking at a large language model-based tool, right? So security, that's everything your firm probably already knows really well. SOC 2 compliance, making sure that you're doing your security reviews, your security policies, don't slack on that, right? All AI tools should still make it through your basic security reviews. And then in addition to that, there's also risk around training data, which is part of privacy risk, right? You kind of risk putting client data into the models. There are ways to avoid that, and we'll talk about that too, but I want you to understand why that is a risk first, right? So at a very basic level, when you add client data into a model that is not legal specific and that has training data turned on. So those are the caveats, right? And we can talk about how to disable that and how to navigate that and manage that. But if you use a general model or if you use free ChatGPT, chances are anything you do to interact with the model, anything you give it, right, in terms of additional data, it will make that part of its training and part of its, it's basically a feedback loop, right? It's kind of like training a dog, right? The more you say, hey, I give you a treat when you do X, the models do reinforcement learnings as well, and they will adopt and take in new information. So the way that works is you might say, draft a letter for John Smith's divorce. AI learns that to get smarter, and that's why they get so much better, so much faster, is because we're all helping train these models, right, with our interactions. And then months later, if a user asks about divorce, it's a small chance, but there is a real chance that could surface if you had training data turned on.
I've had that experience, so yes. Not with the
it can happen,
lawsuits,
yeah,
right.
exactly. So you need to be really careful about these data controls. So what can you do about that? So I think the best protection against this specific type of risk is something called net zero data retention. And that's a mouthful, that's a lot. But basically, you can work either with tools, right, like dedicated legal tools. Like at Formally, we have net zero data retention for all data that we use. What that means is, hey, we're okay processing our data through the large language model, but we don't want the model to learn from that data, or we don't want it to retain like any of my data, right? So you're basically able to control who has your data and who stores your data, which means that the large language model becomes a pass-through, right? Like there's only that security risk during the pass-through, but you're able to eliminate and manage that privacy risk really amazingly. So ask for net zero data retention. Another nuance here is asking for net zero data retention is even better than saying turn off training data, because large language model providers, for the purposes of making LLMs secure, they have to actually retain a certain level of data for the purposes of something called abuse monitoring, right? So they want to make sure that nobody's saying, hey, how do I, blow up this convention center? Like, what would be the correct steps to do that, or, other nefarious reasons potentially, right? So they do something called abuse monitoring if they detect that a user has been using that. But legal tools can actually apply for an exemption from that, and that's that net zero data retention, right? They're saying, I don't want any of that retained because we know that our users are using it in a safe context, right? Like we have other measures in place to make sure that this is not used for nefarious reasons. So the large language model providers can give you an exemption, and that's the highest level of privacy, that's the highest privacy standard you can ask for.
So let's just say the law firm that I work at is evaluating an AI tool. And as a heavy user, as a paralegal or a support staff, I'm using it and I'm asked for my opinion.
Yeah.
Do I just go and say it should be zero data retention? Like, what is the best way to go and let the vendor know? Like, what is the simplest way to say? Is it more like, I don't want this to be training on my AI model? Is that the simplest way?
I mean, I think that's the simplest way to ask, but if you ask for net zero data retention and they don't know what that is a flag, right? That's information. I think it depends on what type of data you want to process with a large language model. If it's non-sensitive data, you might be okay with not having net zero data retention, but if you're processing PII or sensitive cases or any data that you would not want to be stored by a large language model provider, that's the kind of highest level you can ask for. So
yeah,
providers should know about this, and if they don't, again, that is some signal for you as well.
And so then, and I'll probably let you continue, but is this then a good lead way, or rather leaning into more having AI principles, or just having
100%.
a good understanding of, okay, these are the things that we're going to accept and these are the things that we're not?
Yeah, so we actually, maybe are against our interest, but we publish a list of things that you can ask your vendors, right? Like, so Formally publishes a list of, how to audit your vendors. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to go into more depth. But yeah, definitely have an AI policy, have a policy in place, hold your vendors accountable to that, right? And what I say here too is get it in writing. Make sure that they actually say we do not train on client data. We have net zero data retention, and also look for things like SOC 2 compliance. And yeah, the scary thing is if you don't take those precautions, there is a real chance that your data could be leaked, quote unquote, into the models. All right, so here's some other things that we get questions about, right? Which is, will it make mistakes? Yes. The answer is yes. Statistically, about 5 to 10 times, 5 to 10% of the times. The way these models work is, again, they're probabilistically true, but that means they will make mistakes, and they will give you answers that sound plausible that might be false, because they are trained for grammatical correctness and nuance, and there's so much going on in these models. But yeah, they will make mistakes. But I think my answer to that is, that's again what makes you valuable, right? What makes you valuable in these interactions is trusting your gut, checking the work, right? You can avoid some mistakes by doing clearer prompts. So that's something else that we spend a lot of time working with firms on, is how do you craft a prompt that is precise, right? It's typically better to ask a model to help you understand a concept broadly, or to be a brainstorming partner to you, than to actually do the deep legal research, right? So I think it's much better to ask, hey, I'm reviewing this case, it's attached here, I'm giving it to you for context, and I'm looking for something that would help me, draft this petition in this particular way. What would be some quotes in here that I could use? That's a much better prompt than what are good cases to use for, defending an asylum seeker. Right? use your judgment, use specific prompts, and that's going to help you avoid mistakes, and it's going to be a really great partner to you if you can use it that way. Is my data safe? I think we covered that pretty broadly. I will say, contrary to a lot of misconceptions, right, don't feed data into free tools, but I think there are safe legal tools that you can use, even with client PII. But yeah, follow 3 rules, right? Approved tools, no client names, like, always review. And then will I lose your job? No, but I think your job is evolving, and I think, shaping that proactively is going to be a huge advantage. I think the actual risk is not having an AI policy at the firm, and then, folks just using whatever they can find online, right, or like using it under the table. I say the same thing. I give a lot of talks at law schools, right, and they're like, well, our professors don't want us to use it, and I think that's a failure at the education, like at the institutional level, right? Like, I think universities need to encourage law students to use AI, but they should be able to articulate, how did you use it? How did you collaborate with it? What was your policy around it? Can you explain to me how that amplified the impact of your research, right? So don't be that firm that says we're going to ban it categorically. I think that's actually not going to work really well. And also don't be the person using it, kind of generically and putting client data at risk. So I think embracing it proactively, that's really the main, the main takeaway here is like, be proactive about how you want to shape your AI narrative.
Sorry, Emily, I do see quite a lot of people standing at the back.
Yeah,
if you'd
please
like
come to us.
please
Yeah, there's
come
so
in the
much
front.
space.
I feel bad seeing a lot of people standing at the back,
Yeah.
so please, there's a lot of space in the front if you'd like to make it.
Oh yeah, it'll feel nice for us too to have some friends up here.
Thank you.
All right, so because this is really a session designed for support staff, I also wanted to be really clear. I manage my team, and I want my team to come to me with tools and suggestions on how to make their work better, right? So I think a really concrete way to approach, introducing a new AI tool at your firm could be to say, hey, I've identified, a way to save time on this particular task. Maybe I think it could save us, like, let's say 2 hours a week. And I want to test it first on some non-sensitive tasks, right? Because we haven't maybe vetted it yet. We haven't gone through procurement. So I want to test it out on something safe. And I'll be using this particular tool. Could we try this for a week and just measure the results? And I think that makes it so much more approachable, right? And then I think what you're going to get is, okay, like, here's some concerns though, So I think this is how you kind of respond, is like, is it secure? Hopefully is the first question. And then you can say yes. If you can do your research. Most companies will tell you if they're SOC 2 compliant, for instance. And you can also usually inquire about things like net zero data retention, in terms of confidentiality, right? If they're not comfortable yet, or if you haven't gone through a review, you can say, I'm not going to use identifying information. And then, if it asks, what if it makes mistakes? I think your response is going to be, I'm still in charge, and I own the output of the large language models I work with just as much as I own my own outputs, right? Like, when I interview software engineers even, and you're like, oh my God, software engineers are so technical, right? They must know AI. But it's shocking how many people can't defend the output of the LLM. So don't be that person, right? Like, don't say, oh, well, I used Claude, I used ChatGPT to generate it. No, own it, right? Say, yes, I used an AI tool to generate it. Here's what needed to happen, here's what needs to improve about it, and here's how I kind of managed that tool and how I owned the process end to end.
I honestly love that.
Another question we get a lot is like, what will clients think? Clients actually love it. Most of them prefer using AI. 28% don't care either way, and only 31% prefer without AI. We expect that to shift, but I just wanted to give you the numbers. A lot of them seem to be really embracing it, and what we're seeing with the firms that we work with, again, we work with a lot of AmLaw 100 firms, we're actually seeing that having a tool like Formally is actually helping them close deals and is part of the kind of RFP process. So we're seeing a strong preference towards it. What we're also seeing is a need to be able to turn off AI functionality. So we have to build AI toggles, for instance, where users can opt out. And I think that ability to opt in or out is critical as well. So that's another thing that you can audit when you work with a vendor, right? You can ask them, is there a way, to use this case management platform without AI? That could be like a question that you could ask your vendor as well. And I think with corporate clients, they're even more clear, right? So if you work with large corporate clients, 68% are fine with you using AI for their work. Again, they value transparency, and they're also using it themselves. So be transparent, be proactive, continues to kind of be the message here.
So we saw a lot of folks raise their hands when we asked them whether they use ChatGPT or not. What is the real difference between the free version of ChatGPT versus what's actually safe to use for legal? Is there a distinction?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of distinctions. I think one is around that safety, privacy topic that we've already covered quite a bit, right? With more advanced versions, you can opt out of training data. However, I think there's also something else that's pretty powerful about custom tools or legal tools is that you can actually build context, right? And as somebody who's a power user, it's unimaginable for me to use just a fresh instance of ChatGPT that doesn't have context. Because it's going to sound off, it's not going to know things, it's going to perform so much worse. So what I'm actually seeing with the superpower users is that you can start curating your algorithm, right? Like you can start curating your own output. And if you have paid versions, you can do that without feeding that into the general model.
So you're saying instead of the free, always go in for the paid, that's a lot more, that gives you more control.
It gives you a lot more control over like how you use it, how you interact with it. It also gives you access to things like, I don't want to be a ChatGPT ad. You should use whichever large language model provider you use, but it does give you more nuance as well, right? Like using different models for different tasks. I use the thinking models for certain tasks and the reasoning models for certain tasks, and then I sometimes use the just generic fast one for other tasks. So build a preference around it. Again, experiment with what you like, but the main thing is that you should use something that has data controls and ideally has some nuance and context on legal use cases.
Perfect.
All right, I brought Jack in. You already heard him talk, but he said, if your law firm doesn't embrace AI, you're at a fundamental competitive disadvantage. And I think that hits home. All right, let's get into some real world use cases, because this is all great at a high level, but how do you actually take this home? What are some things that you can try? And again, this is non-exhaustive. I encourage everyone to actually go home, have a 1-hour meeting with your team and ask what are some things that we are currently overwhelmed by or that we don't enjoy, doing, and use that as foundations to help you brainstorm how to use AI. Have a design thinking session about how to embrace it, but I want to give you some starting points today. So my favorite thing right now is speech to text. And here's why. I, as you can tell, like to speak quickly sometimes, and research shows that your voice can be up to 7 times faster. Again, some of you might be really fast typers, so that might be not quite as high in reality, but I can speak about 220 words per minute, but only type about 45. So if you want to write really good prompts, or if you want to use your voice, it's a really powerful tool. So here are some concrete ways you could use it, right? You could say, here's a time entry. You could also, dictate your notes while walking back from court. And these dictation tools have gotten so much better in the past year, right? They used to be kind of bad. I use something called Whisperflow. It can format the bullets for me. It can remember the names of clients I work with so that I don't have to spell it out. I don't have to say the punctuation anymore. So voice is being slept on, I think, and it's super, super powerful, especially because you can more naturally give more context, right? Some LLM prompts are really bad because you're write an email follow-up because you're well, I can't be bothered to spell out a longer prompt, but now you can say, hey, I'd like to really write an email response to this customer. They were really concerned about their case, so I want to write something that's going to really assuage their fear. We're really on top of it. Here are the steps that we've already taken. We also already discussed next steps. Could you help me write a draft that maybe captures that sentiment and, helps me create a clear path forward for the client, right? That is such a better email, and it's going to be such a better prompt for ChatGPT than just saying follow up on this.
But that sounds a little too easy. Okay, give me an example. Let's say I want to organize my notes in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Or I come in and I see a whole barrage of emails, or I've got a gazillion things to do. What would be a good example of a prompt when I'm using voice versus text?
Yeah,
or other
so here's a workflow, and this is something I do. So disclosure, I don't like the AI note takers summaries. I think they suck. Yeah, I do, right? Because I'm like, well, I saw what was important in that meeting, and the AI did not know what was important in the meeting, and I have the judgment and discernment of like saying, well, don't summarize. Also, I'm sorry, I'm a CEO. I don't want my email to sound like a summary to my client, right? Like that's inappropriate, right? Like I'm not the secretary here, so I want to write a good email. So what I do instead is I use speech to text, right? And I say, hey, I just had this meeting. Here's the notes from that meeting. Here are the 3 important key takeaways that I want you to capture. I'm also going to give you the transcript if I have it, right? So you have full context on the conversation. Now write a COO level response to my client about that. Wow, game changer, right? Or you can be like, hey, I just met with this person, like this is what they cared about. You can have perfect memory. You can have perfect memory and it can be curated. So instead of having like pages and pages of AI summaries that are useless, which again, I have strong opinions about, you can have curated notes that represent your actual point of view. So dictate it, you can paste it into an LLM or you can use Whisperflow and you can say, clean up these notes, right? Format them for me into a professional email to my client. And then you can actually review and adjust. And again, some of these tools can actually learn the names of your team members, the names of your clients, right? So I think it's such a powerful way to use LLMs.
Wait, you said Whisperflow. So Whisperflow is it like an app?
Yeah, it's an app. Again, happy if you want to come chat about it. I'm happy to like talk to you about how it works. Yeah, I mean, I'm not partial to use any dictation tool that works for you, but this is one of the ones that I use.
So I've tried speech to text. Is there any difference from where it was, let's say, early this year to where it is now? Like, what's the difference versus it just making life easy to give more context?
Yeah, I mean, I think the new speech to text providers, like again, the ones I use, you can use them in any text field, so you're not constrained anymore. And the really good ones don't need you to use punctuation anymore, so they can actually clean it up while you're speaking too. So it's not going to have the ums and the ahs and the other things in it. So yeah, they've just gotten a lot better. And there's also speech-specific models now that they're using that can help the models understand written speech. Like, I'm an immigrant, I have an accent, so it can actually work with accents better as well. So there's just some other things that have improved over the past year.
Are we seeing anything, this is just kind of question, are we seeing anything more like with translations? For example, if I am saying it in a specific language, it automatically translates into English. Is there any...
It does okay. The translation models are also getting a lot better, but don't sleep on them. They are getting better. Yeah, I'm a huge language nerd. I speak like 10 languages, so I love the idea of using LLMs for translation. I feel like it doesn't always get all the nuance, but it's getting better. Google Translate is still pretty solid as well for kind of using that. But we still always put a native speaker to review the actual LLM outputs of translations. So again, kind of similar principle, right? Like use it as a first draft. It is a lot faster to review a translation than to generate one from scratch. Okay, here's another one that I love. So I use this a lot internally. So this is where I think meeting recordings can be useful. So we are growing a ton, right? Like I'm hiring a bunch of people, and as a fast evolving organization, there's always a ton of new context, and we can't really keep up with the documentation, right? But we want to make sure that our new hire has all the context. So I really love using transcripts or recording meetings, right? And then creating kind of custom GPTs, for instance, that help answer questions about internal workflows and processes. So I think this is a really good use case. You can feed those transcripts into a custom GPT. You can then write a prompt. You can use speech to text to write a really great prompt, right? And you can help create kind of a knowledge base for onboarding. And then you can use that for helping the new hire answer any common questions, right? Yeah, and they're always available, never annoyed. So I think you can just use it to turn one training session into a permanent searchable knowledge base. I also sometimes use these transcripts to actually create standard operating procedures for my team internally.
And custom GPTs available only on paid?
Yeah, they actually are. So you can create a custom GPT with a free account, I believe. So again, if this is like non-sensitive information, you might feel comfortable using the non-paid version, although I do always encourage people to look for specific tools, but this is a easy thing to sort of start incorporating into your work. And I love this because I'm impatient, and I don't want to always explain the same thing over and over again. I want to create one piece of really solid documentation. And this is kind of similar, right? Like the notes and the workflow. I just want to give you another example, right? Like sometimes when I'm on the road and I don't have time to actually sit down and type up my notes, but they're fresh right now, I actually use speech to text, or I even just like record a voice memo that I'm going to transcribe later on to just make sure I don't forget the most important things. So if I'm on the road or if I'm, moving or I'm in transit, I actually use speech to text to kind of write these notes. And then you can kind of use that to help you, create assessments, write follow-ups, identify areas that need follow-up, flag inconsistencies, but it helps you kind of keep everything really fresh. And it could help you with, preparing materials for your attorney or your partner in a really easy way, even if you're kind of on the go. All right, so here's kind of a small 30-day plan. And again, take this with a grain of salt. I just wanted to make it super clear, like some things that you can do. So week 1, I'd say, is really just try one thing. Like, don't try to do everything at once, right? Like, pick one task. Maybe you have that brainstorming session with your team. Use AI for just one task that feels like it could be automated. Review everything it produces, apply your judgment, help fine-tune it, give it feedback, and notice how much time you save, or not. Honestly, we've tried to use AI for certain things, and we decided it was bad, and we did not want to continue using it. Like, that's okay, too, Like, just because that tool is available, it doesn't mean you need to use it for that exact purpose. So if you don't like the notes that the AI summary generates, do something else and adjust your workflow as you kind of go along. Week 2, I think it's a great time to start adding voice, right? Try dictating instead of typing. You can start with internal notes. You can do simple letters. Your hands will thank you. Yes, I do think it helps. It also, actually, it's helped with my posture. This is such a weird thing to say, but I used to like hunch over like typing just because I don't have perfect posture. So I really like the idea of being able to kind of walk or be active while I'm working. Week 3 is really about getting comfortable, right? So you can start creating templates for common requests. You can show your colleagues what you learned. Maybe you can train someone else. Again, you can continue to track your time savings, and then hopefully you can share some wins with your team as well, right? You can say, hey, I've tried this for 2 weeks. Here are the results. So I love this approach of like A/B testing AI products and like figuring out what actually works for you. By week 4, you're ahead. Good news, it didn't take forever. You're already so far ahead. You probably already know more than 50% of legal staff. Hopefully you've saved some time. And then hopefully you'll also have proof that it works, right? Because you were iterating in weeks 2 and 3. And then you might be ready to expand and start using AI for other things.
Okay, I know we spoke about this a little bit. For this wonderful group sitting right here, what if the decision makers, like their attorney, people who are at the position of making a decision that this is what we need to buy, if they're very AI averse? Mm-hmm. Any piece of advice where, as a paralegal support staff, I want to use AI, but they're not?
Yeah. I love to use data, right? So I love to say, hey, here's a small experiment we can run. Here are the results it produced. I love the idea of saying, hey, this is how much time I'm spending on it right now. I think I can save this much time using this tool. Let me try it for a week and let me vet it, right? So I think starting small and having really measurable goals and approaching it like an experiment often helps take the guard down, right? And then you can come back. After you run that experiment, you can say, hey, we saved 3 hours. That converts to $600 for the firm, right? So the most effective staff and employees, and then this applies to my team too, right? Like when somebody comes to me with a proposal, I want to make sure that they have done their research, that they can have a low risk, small scale way to prove it first, right? And then I think that you can start making and building the case for expansion after that. But I think it's okay to start small. And I think data doesn't need to be like you've done a survey on 100 people. I think data can be like, here's how I tracked my time this week, and here are the outputs that it generated. So being transparent, being proactive, I think really helps in helping convince even the biggest skeptics.
Thank you.
And that's really all I have for you all today in terms of content, but I'm really excited to take your questions and get your input and help understand where your thoughts are, your concerns, and help you kind of manage this exciting transition moment.
So before we jump into questions, which I actually love that we have enough time, if we had to walk away with one key thing from the safety, the 30-day plan, what would that one thing be?
I really think it is about creating measurable, repeatable, small steps with these tools, right? I think that's maybe the main practical takeaway. I do also want to give you another takeaway that I think is a reframing and the mindset shift, which is this is your chance. Like these tools are evolving. This is your chance to choose how you want to work and what you want to work on. So I strongly encourage you to think about your interests, what makes you excited, what makes you whole, right? Like your humanity, and amplify that and use these tools to serve that purpose. Because again, as somebody who's worked with corporate counsel, I've worked with amazing immigration lawyers. There's like Greg in here, on immigration cases. Like what always matters is that as a client, I feel like my attorneys have my back. So if that's something you love doing and to give people that feeling, like find ways to use AI to help you amplify that. If you love drafting, do that. If you love research, use it to help you do that. But like don't feel burdened by the things it could do. Shape proactively what you want them to do so that you can, be your best and hopefully do the work that you enjoy most.
Thank you. All right, the best part, questions. So as I mentioned, there will be someone that will be running around with the mic. Do we have someone here to help with the mic?
We do.
Perfect, we do. Excellent. All right, so I do see you raised your hand first, so I'll
Yes.
let you. Do we know where the person with the mic is? Oh, thank
Sorry, we're going to start with the
Okay.
question.
We're ahead of time.
She's here. We're ahead
I
of
wanted
time.
to make sure we have lots of time for questions.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Hi, so I'm not actually an attorney, I'm a consultant. A lot of the feedback that we tend to get, especially from our attorneys that bill hourly, is they're afraid that the use of AI tools will obviously help them speed up their work, but then they're concerned they're going to lose a lot of revenue because they're not going to be able to bill as much for the same tasks that they were doing before. So what do you say to firms who are struggling with that and maybe how they should adjust their pricing models?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question. Thank you so much for asking. I have a few thoughts on that. One is that what we're hearing from a lot of firms is that the work that they're delegating to LLMs is not billable in the same way, or clients are upset when they're getting billed for it, like relabeling documents, right, according to firm standard, or doing data entry, right? So those are the things that clients don't really love paying for when they see that on the statements. Sometimes there's even pushback there. So that's one thing that we're seeing. The other thing, and that's really popular in certain practice areas, is to start billing by matter and per case, right? So we are seeing a shift towards more value-based billing almost, right, instead of time-based billing. So that is something that you can explore. We're also seeing firms get creative around things like membership. I think back to that point that I was mentioning earlier where I was saying people really crave great legal care, right? Like in thinking about legal care as a concept, some firms are starting to get more creative about how they kind of bill for things like that, services, firms being there if you need them, having availability. So I think there are ways to shape that also proactively. But the consensus we're hearing is that firms are starting with the things that are hard to bill for and then moving kind of to other tasks later on. And most clients really appreciate it when the attorney uses AI and bills them less for something, which may hopefully result in them getting more work as well.
Perfect. We'll take one more, and then we'll jump in. We'll switch between the virtual and maybe I'll take someone right at the back, and then I'll come to you.
Hi, my name is Sam. Thank you for your presentation. I feel like I actually have kind of a complete opposite problem where my boss is incredibly supportive of AI, which I think is great. Like, that's why I'm here. But she doesn't, I think, always consider the implications. So, she's really trusted me and tasked me with that. It just feels like a lot to understand about how to implement in small ways responsibly. So I guess my question is, how can you communicate to your team the importance of using it responsibly and maybe some small ways that are always going to be responsible uses that you can implement?
Yeah, such a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. I feel like it's yeah, there's some folks who are really like use AI for everything, and then some folks that don't. So in terms of what's like how to approach it, I think again, starting small and giving kind of a plan, an implementation plan, tends to build a lot of trust with your manager too, right? To say, hey, here's the first 3 things we're going to do, and I'll try to give you some examples of things that I think are relatively safe. The other argument on why should we vet these tools, why should we ask for things like net zero data retention is I think that, and this is like common, I feel like this is common wisdom, common knowledge, but trust is very easily broken, right? Like you don't want to be that firm that, leaked data, like client data into a free AI tool. You don't want to be the attorney who made up a citation on a case and gets fined for it, right? So I think the argument is really just like the stakes are high. You're doing really important work every day, and we honor the importance of that work. So we want to make sure that the tools we use reflect that as well. So I think that would be my kind of high-level TLDR of like what to tell your managing partner. In terms of things that are safe, I think like internal tools, right? Internal documentation is a great one. Partners tend to love that too, because again, they can't really bill for that. So I think this is a really great way to kind of like start with toolings like how do we create better internal documentation? How do we help with training materials? How do we, answer common questions? Those tend to be safer use cases as well. So yeah, those are some recommendations that I would give.
Amazing.
All right. We'll take a question from the virtual audience from Jessica. Her question is, it appears that we as a law firm can share one paid ChatGPT account. Will this affect our outcomes negatively if 30 plus people are using the same paid account?
Oof. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if I can argue either way. I would probably say it's probably a good idea to get licenses for the tools you're using, just to make sure that there's no issues down the line. I don't know. I always err on the side of caution when it comes to these things, personally. But in terms of outcomes, I mean, from a technical perspective, I think there's an argument to be made that it's helpful to have separate accounts so you can curate separate instances with separate perspectives, right? So what's an example of that? Like my assistant uses her own instance of ChatGPT, and we've made sure that it works really well for her tasks, right? Which is like assistant-based, but she sometimes uses my instance that has like the CEO perspective on things. So that's like another thing, right? Like you can basically curate the context of each instance. So that might be another reason to potentially get separate accounts. But in terms of billing loopholes, I'm not sure.
I would also kind of presume each one has their own style. Like prompting is an art and a science.
Yeah.
And so the way you would go about asking questions and the details that you would want to get for the work that you're looking for is going to be so different from what, someone else is going to do it. So 100%, I think.
100%.
Thinking through licensing would help.
Yeah.
Right over there.
You mentioned SOC 2 compliance and, making sure that we're turning the training portion of that off. What is a couple of examples of how, our small firms can get into that license? Is that, what would be a specific example in like ChatGPT or Gemini?
Oh, on ChatGPT? I mean, I think even just getting a paid account, will help you get those licenses like OpenAI is default, SOC 2 compliant. If you need net zero data retention, you do probably have to work through a vendor, like a legal service provider. Like, we have access to the secure version of the API as part of being kind of a software developer, right? So you might have to go through a vendor if you want net zero data retention. But for opting out of training data, right? Like if you're comfortable with like one level above that, then I think you're able to kind of just go into your data controls in ChatGPT and get a paid version.
And so just a paid version with training turned off kind of gets us there?
It depends on your comfort level, right? Like
Right.
some firms are really not comfortable with OpenAI retaining any client data. So it depends on kind of what you're comfortable with
And
there.
I think majority just knowing how AI operates, paid models they usually do not go for where publicly everything is accessible. And I think that's the reason why
Yeah,
you're
but they
paying
could get
for it.
audited in that 30-day period, right? So they have
Okay.
to like retain data for 30 days. So if you put in client data and they get audited, or if somebody sees it because they're doing abuse monitoring and you're working on a sensitive case, that's kind of the risk that you're exposing yourself to, is that 30 days history that they retain for the purpose, not for the purposes of training the model, but for the purposes of doing that abuse monitoring. So I do think it's still a good idea to potentially look into legal specific tools.
Can we get one from virtual? Oh, okay, perfect. Sounds good. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nusha. I am the CEO of Tecta AI. My question, or more like concern, is two things. A, we deal with a lot of wrappers that use models, and the models are compliant with SOC 2 and GDPR, but the wrappers aren't, because when you're using, either it's agentic or not, a lot of APIs are called, search engines are called. So an agentic tool's compliance may not be enough. Also, we're witnessing the behavior and performance of these AI tools shifting over time. We've seen their tone softening or taking irregular shortcuts. Also, when they're multi-model or multimodals, there are error propagation problem that is not really a severe problem at a single model tool. So I think as law firms are thinking about moving beyond just a chatbot or chat GPT, it's good to be concerned about how to make sure these agentic tools that are, a lot of them are offered in this as a partner to ClioCon, how their behavior may shift over time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to speak to that. I mean, I think the main thing is that you need to make sure that your provider is compliant, right? So ask for the SOC 2 certificates, not just about the sub-processors, but also ask for the actual tool itself, right? So if you're using a wrapper, do your diligence and make sure that the company itself is compliant. SOC 2 compliance is mostly around internal company procedures and policies, right? So what you're really ensuring against is making sure that the company has ethical data standards, right? Has security processes and procedures in place. So that's something that you can verify. And usually SOC 2, well, actually I know this, SOC 2 requires that each of their sub-processors is also compliant. So you need to disclose the list of sub-processors. So if you work with somebody who's SOC 2 compliant, they should be able to provide that all to you. In terms of performance shifting, yeah, I think that's expected actually, right? I'm not surprised by that at all. I think some things that you can do is, again, work with specific tools that have things like few shop prompting, like fine tuning, training data. Often the legal tools themselves, we have to re-prompt based on how the model evolves, right? So we shift our internal prompts to make sure that we maintain a certain benchmark of performance. But yeah, I think my answer to that is work with a provider you trust, right? That you think is going to help you always get the best outcomes, and ask those questions about how they're managing performance, what they do when new models come out. So those are some other questions that you can ask as part of your diligence process.
Can we get one from the virtual, and then depending on time, we'll have one more in person?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a virtual question from Michael. His question is, what if the provider declines to enter into a net zero data retention contract, perhaps because my firm is too small?
Too bad for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might have to look somewhere else. This may be my answer here, candidly, if it matters to you. But again, I think use your judgment, right? How much do you care about that? Are you going to give it sensitive data that you are scared will be leaked in a potential, 30-day time period if you're worried about that? So I hate that I'm giving this answer. It's a very lawyerly answer, but it's it depends. It depends on what you're comfortable with. It depends on how much you need that provider or that tool. It depends on what the alternatives could be as well. So I think those are my general thoughts on that is understand your tolerance for risk and understand your use case and then make decisions based on that information.
And I can give the example as part of Clio, providers need to be very cognizant who they're selling to.
Yeah.
And if they themselves are saying we don't want something that is so essential, they probably might need to relook at why they're doing what they're doing. And so I think it starts from that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I will say from a provider's perspective, it's a huge advantage to be thoughtful about security and privacy, right? It's definitely something that helps us build trust with our clients. It's something that helps us, roll out our product with different firms. So from a provider's perspective, maybe you can pitch them on how much of an advantage that actually is.
And can we have one more question here? I think we might have time for two. You've raised your hand a lot, so
Yeah,
we'll make sure we get to you, and then the gentleman at the back.
Yeah, I'll also stick around for a bit if you have questions you want to come up.
I just have a quick question. What is your opinion on Plod AI?
Oh, I love Claude. I think it's a great tool. It depends on what you're using it for, right? So I think I use different LLMs, like even base models for different tasks. Claude tends to be a bit more flowery in the language is maybe a way to describe it, right? Like, but Claude has really interesting ways to reason. Claude is really great for coding, for instance. I know that you all don't do coding, but that's the way I use it. Claude is also really cool for creating. They have something called artifacts. So you can actually ask it to build like mock-ups or cover pages, right? Like it can actually generate different outputs. But yeah, both Claude and ChatGPT, I think, are really powerful platforms. I think sometimes it's also a matter of preference, right? Like which output do you like most? I had a phase where I was partial to the output of like 4.0, and now I tend to like, 5 Pro. But again, I think the more you interact with the models, the more you're going to start developing a taste and a preference as well. But I would encourage you to play around with as many of them as possible.
Thank you. Can you give us resources of the AI tools you use, whether it's within...
Yeah, come up to me and I'll share them. I don't want to put all these like random companies. Like I'm not affiliated with any of them, but like I'm happy to, if you come up to me, I'm happy to like send them to you over email. If you're interested, you can email me and I'll follow up with you with a list of things I like to use.
Thank you. We'll wrap that up with one at the back. And then we'll be here. We'll be sticking around for a bit.
But yeah, happy to share it. I don't know. I don't know if it was appropriate to like advertise particular tools. Like I'm not a social media influence marketer, so.
Hi there, my name is Evan. I'm actually a law student, but just trying to get my best grasp of the legal landscape as things progress.
Cool.
For earlier LLM models, I think we saw the rise of frameworks and almost over-engineering prompts. And these newer
100%.
models, it's a little bit different. What strategies or techniques have you and your team used to get the best outputs from the prompts you're inputting?
Yeah, love that question. That's such a fun question. I think, just to like elaborate on Evan's point a little bit, some of the reasoning models tend to overthink things, which I find it's almost cute. It's like funny, right? Like, have you ever drafted an email and you're like, all right, here's all the things I'm going to say. And you start with this like really long draft and you're like, actually, I don't want any of that. Like, and then you make it super short and then you're missing all the context. Like they kind of do that. It's kind of interesting. Like some of the models overthink things to the point that they're like not giving useful answers. So the fastest fix is to just switch from a reasoning model to a, like GPT-5, for instance. It tends to not do that as much. So that's like the quickest fix. In terms of getting the best output, yeah, I again, like be specific, right? Like you'll get more advanced in terms of which models to use for which task, right? So sometimes I love using deep research, for instance, on ChatGPT if I want to get a really good sense of a topic, right? And what I'll do is like I'll kick off a deep research query. I'll do something else and I'll come back to it later and then I'll check all the sources. In terms of prompting, I think RAG is really powerful. So, setting up custom GPTs with special knowledge bases, right, that can really actually retrieve from that knowledge base and making sure to actually, there's like other hacks, like you can tell it, pretend you're the best software engineer in the world, and these are your things, and like treat this task as if your promotion depended on it. You can like kind of like try to prompt it with like incentives. There's all sorts of you can offer it to tip it. There's all sorts of things that work. Although I don't know, I don't want to be responsible if the AI overlords come and collect the tips in 10 years. No, I'm just that's a joke. But yes, those are some strategies. I think RAG is really powerful because basically instead of saying, hey, I want you to go into the library and, give me an answer based on all the books in the library, you're saying like, hey, I want you to read these 5 books. And then give me answers based off these 5 books. That's such a better answer usually than like going into the ether and like kind of like seeing what's around,
Thank you for being such an amazing audience and for asking some amazing questions. Amelie, thank you for your time and for enlightening us on some of the fundamentals, but I think some of the basics that we all really need to take home and well, we cannot run away from AI. It's here, and it's going to be the future as well. So thanks, everyone. We'll be sticking around. And if some of you have any more questions, happy to answer. Oh, this was fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
And here's my contact if you need that.